Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kubeflow community meeting for the 8th and 9th of February 2022. We're getting close to the the distribution testing phase of 1.5's release cycle, so we'll talk a bit about that and about that release generally. I've just got a few basic agenda items, really just trying to find things that I think need to be discussed in a community meeting. If anyone else in the meeting has important things or things from last week that we need to follow up on, please chuck them in here. But if we can just kick right off into the 1.5 stuff, that'd be the best, I think. So the dates are, from reading what's here, if this is correct, the manifest testing is currently the phase we're in, and that will end on the 16th of February, 2022. And there's distribution testing, which will start next. So again, manifest testing, I think, is just making sure the manifests are in working order and can be deployed. And then distributions is when the people who package those manifests, you test it in their respective environments and make sure that it works for them. And then obviously release that's being targeted is March 9th. It's what I can see here. Hopefully that's correct. So Josh, do you want to do a quick update of what you know?
Yeah, I think there's been a final outreach to all the working groups to ask if they're going to add any more items. And I think we've seen a couple cherry picks and a few items being merged in even in the last couple days. The initial testing seems to be going pretty well. There was a request from the Kserve team to update the Knative from, I believe, 0.22.1, which we're currently using, to 0.22.3. There was some bug or some issue, and that would help us be able to support Kubernetes 122. Right now, what I heard is that we are not going to do that upgrade. We're going to test with Knative 22.1, 0.22.1, and then complete that, make sure that the manifests are working, which they seem to be doing okay, but there's still things trickling in, but everything looks pretty green, and then like green status. And once that testing is done, then we'll look at potentially making modifications to go to 0.22.3 so we could support Kubernetes 1.22, at least for some of the items. I guess it would be for Kserve in particular. But everything I'd say looks pretty green. The two questions that were outstanding was, one, the training operators working group, and really all the working groups, but the training operating working group, they were asking if they had a final RC version. I think it's 1.4.RC0, which would be in Kubeflow 1.5. And I'm not sure we've got a confirmation on that yet. And but other than that, I think we're all pretty clean. Just a few things being added. So the schedule looks okay. The biggest concern that we have is now, as we hand off to the distributions, you know, are they ready to start testing? Can we get a confirmation that they're going to test with 1.5? And can we give them some form of validation test script, which Kimonis was putting together? And I believe that was a notebook that kind of exercises, you know, the notebooks, the training operator, I think Katib, as well as the pipelines and maybe serving. So I think that is an advantage we haven't had before, is that having this, maybe we had the end-to-end notebook in the last release, I can't remember, but we're trying to help the distributions there. And then there's you know, obviously the question that comes later is how we take care of the documentation. I probably don't want to dig into that just yet, but I know I covered a lot. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, notebook controller had like two issues reported yesterday. Kimonos was hoping to merge like the PRs by, I guess, like today or tomorrow. But I see like PRs for one of them. Other one, I think still needs to be worked on.
Is there specific things you want to raise?
I'm not sure if it affects the timeline since we are all still in the testing phase. Another RC another RC might be cut by tomorrow or day after.
That's fine. Do you need me to review a PR there? Because I can review a PR there. I can review it and merge it if it's fine.
Okay, I can send you the link. You can.
Yeah, just chuck it in the chat and I'll look at it later.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'll just put that there so I don't forget.
Yeah, I saw a lot of notebooks action in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some things. Yeah, there is an error here. I agree. Anyway, cool. Okay, I'll open these so I don't forget about them. Okay, so other than that, Josh, did we have anything we needed specifically from the people here? Like, is anyone here?
I am James Liu. I'm speaking of Q4 pipeline first. So
Right.
for Q4 pipelines, we have encountered a few issues, and then we have already cherry picked them and make a new RC release. I'm going to share the link in the chat over here. This is the new RC that's going to be there. And then we are going to test it in our CI/CD cluster to make sure it's working. Oh, it's not.
A changelog apparently is 404.
Okay. Okay, the changelog, yes, I know it's not working because you need to change the
It says
parameter
version in $ there. I think it's been not substituted correctly.
Yes, yes. Chen was the one that made the change. I'm going to make that update as well. But basically, there's a few issues that we've cherry picked, and then I'm going to share another link over here to describe what we have cherry picked.
It's not on the changelog?
It hasn't been in the master branch yet, but this is the PR that we cherry picked. So for manifest, feel free to use that new RC to do the testing, and that's for pipelines. For Kubeflow on Google Cloud on distribution, I think we might need some extra time because of the low staffing we are currently experiencing, but we will foresee more people to join very soon. But currently, I think if you have some kind of like ongoing fixes with a notebook controller, and you might be able to consider, for example, extending the timeline. But if you think the current timeline is working, then you don't need to adjust it just for us. You can follow the same timeline.
Are the issues like issues that will cause problems for users, or what are they?
It's basically low staffing we have currently.
No, not why can't you address it, but how critical are the issues that you aren't able to address?
It's not necessarily an issue, but a lot of things that I need to do to deploy, test, fix for Kubeflow on Google Cloud distribution.
Sure.
Yeah, so
that would be part of the distribution phase as well, though, right?
Yes, it's part of the distribution phase. So just want to give a heads up that I probably need more time for the distribution testing.
Okay, so what time would you need, do you think? So like currently, I think there's quite a few weeks of time in there. So would you need more than that? Like how long would you need? It's from the 16th to the 8th of the next month.
I am currently thinking about extending 1 to 2 weeks, but if this is only Google Cloud, I think we don't need to extend it because I can make a release candidate for Google Cloud distribution first to unblock the whole release process.
Also, what does it actually mean in your sense, a release candidate? Again, because we still need to work on removing the docs from kubeflow.org. So it's really unclear. What does a release mean to you?
So to give more context, like Google Cloud distribution not only depends on Kubeflow, but also depends on a bunch of Google Cloud dependency. So I can do the minimal, like the page you saw over here. The first item, this is the minimal we need for upgrading to Kubeflow 1.5. However, I do have a few items that I need to work on for Google Cloud dependency. So the whole ecosystem is working, but
I think as long as you do know that, as long as it's something that, I think the idea of having the distribution testing phase be before the release is that we can make changes to the release if all the distributions have a problem or a number of them have a problem when in their testing. I think that's more the purpose. But like, so you can, in my mind, when 1.5 gets released, from a Kubeflow perspective, that's the manifests being released to some extent.
Yes, I have been trying to do that separation, but for example, ASM is like the manager version of Istio. Without working Istio, then it's hard for me to confirm that Kubeflow component is working. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I want to make sure
so really just update us. I guess we can evaluate how much time everyone else needs. And if there's not going to be anyone ready on time, then it wouldn't make sense to say that it's released. But if there's a few people ready and you're going to be ready a couple of weeks later, I don't think it's a huge deal.
Sure. I think it makes sense. So
because the idea is that distributions are separate projects to the project. That's the idea. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's again, yeah. And I get, but we also don't want to be saying Kubeflow's out, but no one can install it. So that would be silly. So.
Of course. Yeah. So I understand the purpose is to do the distribution testing in order to find out whether we need any changes to the manifest, Kubeflow manifest. So I just need time to test it and then modify the Google Cloud dependency in order to be able to test those Kubeflow manifests. So just to give you a heads up about this, and if you are kind of like nobody else is going to be delayed on the timeline, then I think it's okay to stick with the current timeline. I can find some workaround.
Cool, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a PR that I want to add to Kubeflow pipelines that fixes something for Amazon, but I need to do that. I've got it written up because right now the log buckets for the artifacts, like where they can be stored on S3. Right now the UI doesn't correctly extract the region. It assumes everything's in US Central 1 or something. But I'll raise a PR. I'll show you what I mean. I'll do it later. So what I'm saying is if you're on Amazon, you can't actually see the outputs if you're not in US Central 1 in the Kubeflow pipelines UI. Anyway.
Okay, feel free to share the PR with me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll raise a PR and show it. Cool. Anyone else from other working groups want to talk about, or distributions need to raise things now? Like maybe notebooks, maybe training operators, maybe if the Kserve guys are here, they're not really part of Kubeflow, but if they're here, the Katib people, anyone here from those? And want to talk, obviously. Cool. So I'm going to take that as everyone in here is happy with the release and is feeling good and confident. Cool. Okay. Josh, do you want anything more for 1.5 before we move on?
No, I think that's good for now. Thank you.
So we say like green for now.
I'm gonna say green.
Cool. We might have some problems with distributions, but that's not impacting the whole project, I don't think. Cool. So there was a Kserve user survey. If that's still going, is that still open?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So this is just highlighting to everyone that the Kserve people who are technically part of the Linux Foundation now, but again, Kubeflow is kind of like a collection of tools, not necessarily controlling all these tools. That's the whole point. They want to do a survey. And if you are a user of Kserve or KF serving, please do the survey. Cool.
Yeah, just on that point, I've seen some initial results from that survey and they've been very interesting. We've got 20 or so people that have responded. We had about 175 in our last Kubeflow survey, but we worked really hard to get that many out. So there is a request here that if folks could respond to this. Users could respond to the survey. It would be great. I know that the working group or the K-Serve people are reviewing it almost all last meeting. So they see the information as being very valuable.
Cool. I don't know if you want to speak to this, Josh, but someone else from Erecto posted this where there was something about, I didn't really have time to read what it was. There was something about wanting to do examples or something from Kaggle. Did you see this, Josh? It's on your website. So.
Yeah, I think that's from Jimmy, and I do believe he wants to update or get people to help. So he's running that.
Is he here, or do you have like a way that people can get in contact with him about this?
I believe they may be on that post there, but if it's not obvious, I'll let him know.
It says drop a line, but that's like the whole of Erecto, so I don't know. Maybe there's I don't know. Anyway, it's just saying if apparently Erecto is doing something with examples related to Kaggle. So if you're a Kaggle person and you want to help make examples that use Kubeflow and make them publicly for everyone to see, I think that's the idea here, because we're trying to refactor this examples repo, which is Kubeflow/examples. And this is one way of doing it, I think. Cool. Anyone got anything they want to say about that before we move on? Cool. Okay, I've just got a few things I want to float with the people here around the website. So the website's been improving steadily over the last few years, really, but quite substantially over the last 6 months. We've restructured quite a bit. Someone wanted to talk? Oh no, Josh. No, sorry. Don't worry. I saw someone's name flash, but don't worry. Okay, so the main thing I just want to highlight is that I think we need to set a new date for migrating the distribution docs out of kubeflow.org. So obviously right now there's an issue here. Originally we did February 1st, but because Google was delayed and really we need to get more interaction with the distribution owners here. I think we need to discuss this and at some point know what's our new date for removing the distribution owned docs. Does anyone from a distribution want to comment about how they feel about this and whether this is going to be a problem for them?
Hey, hi, Suraj here from AWS. I had a comment in the issue. If you cannot call out like AWS distribution as abandoned, that would be great. I have linked the tracking.
It would have to not be abandoned for me to do that.
Sorry?
Where is it hosted? Because if we're talking about the one that's on Kubeflow manifest, well, currently the docs are, unless they've been updated since I posted this, which they could have been, refer to like Kubeflow 1.2, I think.
Yeah, so we have a new repository where we are developing the manifest. We have some documentation there. Currently, we don't have any staffing to work on the website part of it. And that's why we are hosting the documentation in the GitHub repo itself. But before we cut a release on that repo, we'll be having the documentation out. If you scroll down and click on the issue, you will see it. So,
and this is great. So this is perfect. So this is exactly what I was expecting to happen, where like just the rather than having on the sidebar here, rather than having the actual documentation from each of these distributions, it'll just be a link to your documentation, you know? Oh, wrong one.
Yeah. So yeah, that will happen eventually. We have already talked to the documentation team to scope out the effort required to create a new website or have this website on the AWS, have the documentation on AWS docs. So
it doesn't have to, like, I'm not saying that it has to be a website. I'm just saying it has to be somewhere that's not kubeflow.org. If it's in your GitHub and that's fine to you and that's easier for you and it will be done sooner, then that's probably what we should aim for most people.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So for us, I think we want to have a website because GitHub's like, it's hard to navigate. And when you click through links, you just jump around on different websites. Currently, there's a lot of documentation under this Kubeflow on AWS, which we want to port to that new website or wherever we host it. So yeah, don't have a date yet. But yeah, definitely we are trying to track the effort and find an owner to get this done.
Yeah, because what I'm saying abandoned, I don't necessarily mean that Amazon isn't doing something. It's that the current docs on here are definitely abandoned.
Okay, yeah, maybe you can reword it a bit. So it'll be, yeah, because we have a lot of people also creating issues on the new GitHub repository related to like the manifest that we have.
So yeah, I think that's that. Again, this is why the whole point is we want to push distributions to be separate from the project itself.
Yes.
And that's fine, So
yeah, so
cool.
we don't, we'll probably like come up with a date once we have an owner. Currently we are asking like the docs team to do a scope like effort estimation and then give us like some timeline.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, because we're as a community, we'd love to set a date just so that we can kind of force it to happen eventually. I'm sure that once we've got consensus that, because really I know that for a lot of people, it will be like, we want to do it at the same time as everyone else, like remove the docs at the same time so that we're not, so that one group doesn't have docs on the website and one doesn't at the same time. The goal is that we set a date, and on that date, if you haven't migrated, your docs are removed from the website,
Yep.
just so that it has a date, and then there's no unfairness. You know what I mean? That's kind of my perspective there. Cool. So, I mean, are we talking like 6 months, 3 months? Is any other distribution want to talk here, by the way? Is there a Azure person? I saw that there was some updates to the Azure docs. No one from Azure. Anyway, cool. So I just wanted to keep bringing that up. Anyone else from a distribution here? Want to talk about the docs? Nope. I just wanted to raise one thing with the Kubeflow pipelines people that I want to add to the examples. So right now we've got an example section on getting started, but it only links to this examples repo. I think we could add a separate section, which is like exemplary components, like Kubeflow components or something. And then we can just link to those. And most of those live on the Kubeflow pipelines repo. But I just think we could very quickly, the Kubeflow pipelines people could help their users by just adding a section here, which is, we can split this into two sections. One, which is, overall Kubeflow examples. And then another, which is Kubeflow pipelines examples, and then just chuck that there. Anyone from Kubeflow pipelines want to comment on if they want that to happen?
What is the example for Kubeflow pipeline example that you mentioned?
So like, I just mean, so Kubeflow pipelines, we can explicitly reference, I think maybe we should consider making a separate repository for components, but that's a separate discussion. Or even reference components maybe might be a good name. We can the ones that the Kubeflow pipelines team think are good examples of how you should make a Kubeflow component should be listed here.
Do we already have one under the Kubeflow pipeline components in the doc?
What do you mean? Sorry. Well, you mean like when you actually do? Okay, first off, these docs need to be restructured further than they already have been, but that's a separate discussion.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of duplication here. At some point, I'll spend the time to propose a fix here, but there's so much duplication, it's kind of just a lot of work to sort through it all. Yes, when you say building a component, because like people building components, you talk about how it works here. I think this can be improved as well. I think we can probably reduce the amount of documentation at least to 1/5 of what it currently is, because there's just significant, like the questions people have when they start using Kubeflow pipelines are, what is Kubeflow pipelines? Why would I use it? What does it do? How do I install it? And then how do I actually use it, right? And how do I use it really is, there's only 3 ways. It's the SDK, the UI, and the components. And like, then I think we can kind of we can structure the docs around that. You know what I mean?
Right, I know, but let's focus on the first proposal you have about having the Kubeflow pipeline component example.
Or just in a separate repo
above.
or something, or make an example pipelines repo or something. I don't really care.
Right. I think what confused me is what example are we going to mention? I don't know what is the object yet.
Oh, it's an example. It's it's more like a reference component that people can use. Someone's wanting to talk here. Someone.
I apologize. I've just joined. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, it's fine.
I think previously there were sample components right in this folder. They were called. There was a folder called sample, and it showed how to create components from different languages. For example, Python, shell script, R, and Java. So unfortunately, I think someone has deleted them. But maybe can you click on contrib? Maybe they're still there.
There's a lot. You know what I mean? Like.
Yes, and it's in sample. You see, there is sample.
But also, are these actually still samples? You know what I mean? Like, who knows, right? Like, it's like, because this also doesn't really follow the structure that is set out here as best practice, you know, around having a Docker file in here and having, so the best practice is set out as structure your components like this. And I agree, this is a good idea.
So there are kind of several maybe layers and ways to build components depending on where your code is. So and depending on what you have. If you have if you already have a container with some command line program you build, then you just use that. You just use your container image and just write a simple component YAML file. If instead maybe you have a Python program but you don't have container image, then you can organize the data this way. But for many cases, I'd say I've built almost 100 components, and I never had to build a container image. The part from that is because it's a bit hard to publish them as a Googler. But so if you have just a Python function, there is a very easy SDK method called create component from func, which takes your Python function and turns it into a component, and it can create a component YAML file for you. So
yeah, no, I'm aware of all this. It's more like just, I think there's no indication really on the docs right now that there are example components.
Yeah, the docs have been somewhat changed since I wrote them. Another place you could also take a look. If you look at those sample components I've showed you, right? So there is another repository with so it's with the same basically components, but which is more maintained.
So is that under the Kubeflow repo?
So no. So if you go to contrib and check any component, yeah, say for example sample component or anything. So yeah, if you click it, for example, you'll see that there is a canonical location, which is the place where you're expected to see the maybe updated versions.
So really, the general idea here is I think we should try and centralize the community kind of curated components somewhere.
Yeah, it was. We did that before. All components were in the pipeline/components, but there was, I think, some. You see the commit at the top. I think there was some decision to remove most of the components from this centralized location.
Well, I mean, they don't have to be under this repo either. We could just make a separate repo like pipelines-components or something, and then and so that people have an obvious place they can contribute components for their apps as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Although maybe a more scalable idea is to for people to have separate repositories and then have a way to search for them. Actually, the Kubeflow pipeline SDK has the component store class, and which has methods like search and list. So for example, you can do kfp.components.defaultstore.search XGBoost, and it will find you XGBoost components. Similarly, the pipeline editor tool has the component search function as well. But generally,
anyway, I think we're getting quite derailed here, but like the point is just, I think we can put some example components somewhere in the examples, because everyone's been talking about how to improve the examples page. And I think that's something we should put in there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the idea to remove the sample components, maybe it made it somewhat harder for the users. Well,
anyway, cool. Is anyone, so other than that, I think we can definitely discuss this more in the pipelines related stuff, because I think it's very specific to pipelines. The only thing here is just I was just talking more generally on the website. We're trying to improve examples, but when we come to components and what we should do with them, I think we should discuss that as a community. You know, how we can encourage a central location for people to find good components that are made by the vendors of the apps that they manage.
Yeah, it would be great.
Cool. Anyone else want to comment about that before we move on to this one last thing I want to just propose quickly, because this is quite a big change to the website, the next proposal I want to make. Okay, so this one is around the components folder and the external add-ons folder. So if anyone's still here, it's a very short proposal. I just want to say that I plan to do something in here, like propose a change in here to distinguish these in a more correct way, because I think this concept of components and external add-ons makes very little sense for Kubeflow. I think the better distinction is kind of there's definitely some core components that are, when you deploy Kubeflow as a platform, are part of the platform, like the central dashboard and the manifests, probably in some parts of the manifests. And maybe the, you know, and some of the controllers related to the central dashboard, like the profile controller. But beyond that, there's nothing else that's really common to everything. And the next thing becomes, we don't actually control some of the components, which is fine. Kserve is no longer part of the Kubeflow org, but it's still part of the Kubeflow distribution sometimes. So effectively, my proposal is that we kind of, rather than distinguishing components and external add-ons, we have like truly the core pieces, which just has documentation about the truly core pieces. And then we have a secondary section, which is potentially first-party components, in the sense that they are ones that are made by the org itself, like Kubeflow pipelines, like Kubeflow notebooks, like Katib, like the training operator. And then we have just other components, you know, everything else. And then those are things like all the things we've got here, and now Kserve as well. Anyway, that's just my thought process here. I can formalize it later, but I just want to hear what people, if anyone's really opposed to the idea of just rejigging how we arrange these components, to be clear that it's fine that some parts are not part of Kubeflow org, that is. Anyway.
Sorry, I might have missed what you just said.
So like the general proposal is that I need to figure out the exact specifics of what I'm proposing, but effectively the idea is that rather than trying to distinguish components and external add-ons, we instead we decide like platform components. Like I think there's like two groups of components. There's org controlled components, and then there's non-org controlled components. That's definitely the case. And then within the org control components, there's kind of platform ones, pieces that actually make the platform a platform. So those, you know, they're somewhat different to the rest. And then there's the other ones like pipelines and Katib, which are not core to the platform, but are part of it. You know what I mean? And then we've got the third party version of that as well, where there are components that are not platform components, but are part of Kubeflow distributions that people commonly use, like Kserve or Kserve now, sorry. But we just don't control that. And I think I'm just trying to find the best way to distinguish that and show that on the website, because people get really confused because they think of Kubeflow as this set of components.
Which it is, right? I mean, maybe not the most fancy. maybe not the multi-tenancy in here.
Well, that's a feature really, but like,
yeah, no. And maybe not case serving, right? Case serving is probably should be on the other side, but the other things are in scope, right? For at least when we talk about like conformance and such, right? So they're all in scope. So I think they're all Kubeflow components.
I think I think really the question that we're trying to answer is what is Kubeflow, and I think in my mind it's a platform. We set it up here, right? It's an ML toolkit for Kubernetes, right? Wherever it's somewhere on it, architecture, I think. Yeah, ML2 toolkit for Kubernetes. The idea in my mind is that there's only one or two pieces that you actually have to deploy to have Kubeflow, and that's like the dashboard itself and the auth that comes with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
why would you deploy just a dashboard though, right? You would use at least some component for training or for serving for pipeline or whatnot, right?
But there's a potential that someone might choose the central dashboard and KF serving, which are not managed, which are not Kubeflow anymore, right?
So I think the website right here is a little outdated, right? Because KF serving is no longer, it should belong in the external add-on part, from what I understand.
But like I think
the rest of these are pretty much in scope, right?
I kind of have a contrary or an alternative proposal. It may be that, right, it's supposed to be composable, but if the manifests deploy it, then it's part of that. That would be one delineation. What's tested and deployable through the manifest example. And then the other composable parts are external to the manifest deployment process that the community tested with.
I think the main distinction I just want to make is first party versus third party. Because I think that's really the only thing that really matters, right?
I don't see it that way. I think that it's like, is it tested with the community? Because are you going to start breaking out third party? Is Istio third party? Is Knative third party?
No, and so the action notes, I think, to be clear, I think the configs for Istio are first party, because we're not giving you Istio. We're giving you configs for either your Istio, or we also might deploy it for you. But that's really what I view as the piece that is Kubeflow. The configs for Istio are Kubeflow, not Istio itself.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So the first party would be like platform components and components, whatever the heck we're going to call the other one. And platform components would include central dashboard and Istio configs and the profile controller, really, and that's about it. And then non-platform, and maybe the manifests themselves. And then the other pieces are composed. So again, we're talking about first versus third party. It's like apps that we are controlling from a governance perspective and apps that we aren't. That's the first distinction. I think that's the most important to make. And after that, we can discuss whatever. But that's really all I'm proposing. That we, rather than calling it external add-ons, I think that seems too external. It should be like first party components and third party components.
Yeah, I think that distinction seems fine to me. I guess I'm trying to argue for the distinction between platform and non-platform, but both in the scope of first-party components, to me, is not that useful to me.
We could view the platform itself as a component, you know what I mean, and that becomes like a deployment, I guess. But like, it's more just around. I've seen people getting confused about the fact that certain things. This structure is confusing people. That's all I'm saying. That's really what I'm.
Yeah, I think if you take multi-tenancy and KF serving out, I think that's kind of looks okay to me, but I'm open to other suggestions. And also change maybe external add-on to like third-party components. I think that's also a good suggestion.
Or like ecosystem components or something.
Sure. Yeah.
So I have a question. So the multi-tenancy is not really a component, right? It's more of a horizontal feature.
Exactly.
So we could have,
We could put that under Istio configs or something, maybe. The component.
I don't know. I see it more of a platform features. Like if you use Kubeflow, you get these features just by default. And that includes Istio, that includes the multi-tenancy.
We don't get Istio
and then you have
so
these
much.
specific features like the notebook and pipelines and so on, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I agree. This one's, I tried to remove this years ago, but people debated it for some reason. I thought about making a separate section called like features and stuff, but I think that can just be the concept. If this is actually about using the tool as well. So really this is a feature of central dashboard and should just be under central dashboard to some extent. But the architecture discussion definitely can include, the architecture discussion should be rewritten, to be frank, but it should include this multi-user content, I believe.
Well, that belongs to, I mean, I think I agree to like maybe having like a features, because I think these are like horizontals, right? So you have multi-tenancy, maybe you also want to have a section on security, right? Which people probably want to know about. And probably there's other things like this. I don't know, like resource management or something like that. I don't know.
Well,
like,
we can make a concept section, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
And move multi-tenancy there.
You know, Matthew, I see part of this distinction between first party and other is really potentially helping legal teams. So somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to use Kubeflow, and they go, hey, I've got to take it through my legal team. What is Kubeflow? What part are legally under the Kubeflow license and what are under other license, right? And that may be the value there to help people adopt. And it also is a distinction, right? Is it covered under the Kubeflow license agreement?
That's definitely part of it, but it's also like maybe many other people who make open source projects may want to be a third-party component of Kubeflow and contribute the work required to get it to be part of the manifest, but they'll never be part of Kubeflow in a sense, you know? Like they'll be part of the platform.
So they're a third party, right? I mean, it's
exactly
if it's
right.
not if it's not under the CLA, you know, it's third party.
Yeah. But the one part that is first party would be the manifest, right? In some sense, that is a component, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a bit weird.
It could be anything that has a repo or is.
I think I just wanted to raise this idea generally. I'll try and formalize an actual proposal at some point, but I think the main distinction I want to make is just things that are under our control and things that aren't. That's really just the only real serious distinction. There is a question as to why we would be hosting docs for things that aren't under our control. But anyway.
Good discussion.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Has anyone else got anything they want to raise before we close out the meeting or go back to the docs?
Yeah, I have a small PR in the chat, Matthew. If you can take a look when you get a chance, it'd be great.
What does it do? Okay, sure. This looks like a default change. We might need to discuss that. Okay, cool. Other than that, anyone got anything else they want to raise or talk about? Awesome. Thank you guys for coming. I will stop the recording, and if anyone wants to introduce themselves to the community and they're new, they can do so now, I guess.
I'm a new community leader, so it's my first time to join this community. So I'm kind of a user of Kubeflow. So say hi. I want to say hi.
So do you use Kubeflow or are you working for Google or?
I'm using Kubeflow. On my company, we use Kubeflow to make an MLOps platform. So yeah, so I want to join this community. Yeah.
So which parts do you contribute to? Just a quick question.
For the Kubeflow, I'm on the notebook, the part.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Anyone else new who wants to say hi?
Yeah, hi. My name is Vinay, and my company Aurora has been using Kubeflow internally, And as we've started to deploy this out, specifically we use pipelines for training models, and we've started to adopt notebooks. In either case, we've seen increased adoption in our org, and we're coming around to contributing and starting to add features or / fix things that are been impacting our internal users.
Cool. Awesome. So if you've managed to find, because the thing we want to try and improve is the ability for people to contribute. And I know that there's some problems with like owner structures of some of the components, and that is something that we need to work on, how to get people into positions of approving ability and governance ability of each component. I just want to know how you've experienced, what your experience has been like with that.
So my team hasn't, actually put up any PRs. We've been, we've filed a couple of bugs here and there. So in this next month in February, we're going to go through that process to put up some small PRs to AWS user profile stuff and/or notebooks. And I guess we're going to have to go through the process and see what it's like, and seeing if we're able to get, PRs, get feedback. And we also,
yeah. I'm more saying like we just, I think be prepared that part of the contributions that you'll be making is helping us establish new governance structures for, especially around the notebook stuff. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, totally. We, understand this. As I said, we're starting out this process. We just don't kind of, we don't know exactly what and how things work and kind of where things are unowned or very clearly have ownership and guidance that we can get from.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Good to have you. Anyone else want to say anything or introduce themselves? Sorry.
May I ask, like, where you use Kubeflow? Is it like on-prem Kubernetes cluster, or is there a cloud provider that's used?
Yes, we do use AWS. I'm happy to talk with our TAM. We did actually meet some folks from SageMaker about, SageMaker quite recently, last month or so. But yeah, I'm happy to reach out to my TAM to, connect us.
Cool.
Are you using the AWS distribution or just like vanilla Kubeflow?
No, but we do use basically the same stuff from the AWS distribution. Yeah, happy to have this conversation offline.
Yeah, I expect you'd find most people are using the manifest directly with modifications.
Yeah, that's actually kind of where we've been. We actually found it. We had to install an AWS, and we found the existing stuff wasn't working. So we kind of just went off and figured this out and got it running in our environment on AWS.
Cool. Awesome. That's cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves before we just kind of close out the meeting to keep everyone's time?
Hi, everyone. Irudayaraj here. I just started using the Kubeflow, and we started configuring Kubeflow on our on-prem server. Basically, I'm very new to the Kubeflow project, and then I find that the community looks interesting to me. So I want to explore more on Kubeflow and then see where I can contribute. Yeah.
So are you using it actively, or are you just interested?
We are using it actively. We're planning to have the Kubeflow actively in our organization. Yeah.
So like pipelines or the whole platform?
We actually have a platform which is focused on MLOps. So we want to integrate that Kubeflow into our MLOps use cases. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So recently I started setting up the Kubeflow, and then I found there was some incompatible with the latest version of Kubernetes. So I was trying to figure out how and when the release will be made. Yeah.
You're talking about 122?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some issues there.
Yeah. So that's when I started using the manifest to install the Kubeflow. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else here? Don't think anyone else wants to raise their hand and say anything, say hi. Most of the people I can see are familiar faces. So awesome. I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks for coming. Thanks for introducing yourselves, guys. It's always nice to hear new voices and see new faces. Hopefully we can try and make your experience of contributing as easy as possible. But we definitely need to work on it. Please don't feel shy to help suggest solutions to those sort of problems. that's just as much contributing as contributing code. Awesome. Thanks, guys.